Hello, let's cut straight to it. So, for those of you who I think everybody knows now, Daniel Bryan officially retired from professional wrestling as of yesterday. He announced it on his Twitter. I know some people are still kind of under the impression that this might be some storyline on Raw and that he comes out and there's an angle, and perhaps the whole thing was an angle in the first place. But obviously, given the real life circumstances and the very real situation with his physical well-being, we all knew better than that. And there is a mix of feelings and emotions that I am having right now with regards to this. First of all, let's just go back like this. Over the last few years, and I really want to say from 2007, but the way I viewed wrestling changed in a lot of ways. My mental scaffolding was completely rearranged when it came to wrestling around the time of the deaths of Road Warrior Hawk, Eddie Guerrero, Mike Awesome, and Chris Benoit. And then Test on top of that. And the way I viewed wrestling and the way I viewed the wrestlers changed. My mental scaffolding, my schema had changed as a result because of that. And for me, it was no longer about just seeing my favourite wrestlers get the great big push and, getting so pissed off when certain people didn't do so well. It was more of I want them to make as much money as humanly possible and that they leave and exit the wrestling business in as sound a fashion as they can with their physical and mental faculties in place. And then obviously the Benoit and the Test and the Mike Awesome stuff, we knew that there was a lot of concussions with with all of these guys. And we found out some very interesting things in neurological science about concussions. And I did a lot of reading on concussions when it came to professional wrestling and boxing and MMA. And we started to find out in American football, we started to find out just how serious the damage that concussions can give the brain after years and years and years of receiving them. And store that for later. We'll go into the Daniel Bryan story and how this ties in with Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan, obviously, last year retired the Intercontinental Championship or handed back the IC title because of an injury. And I know a lot of people said it was a neck injury and some people didn't know what it was. But when I heard concussion, I immediately felt very, very concerned. And obviously throughout that time there has been so much discussion. People have discussed the concussion situation with Daniel Bryan for a very, very long time. And based on the reading and research that I had done, I was already kind of at that point where I was like, I don't know if I'm too comfortable seeing him return with this long-term history of concussions. And I think back to when I was a few years ago, I got a concussion. I slipped on some ice, I knocked myself silly. I went to an exam the very next day. I blacked out in the exam. I apparently asked my best friend from uni who she was. I had no idea who she was for a few minutes. I was very disorientated. And it really scares me now that whether it's pro wrestlers, MMA fighters, boxers, American football players who have had these concussions and then are going right back onto the field or into the ring or into the cage the very next day after that, after being knocked silly like that. And it made me very, very concerned. And then you hear from Daniel Bryan's own mouth that he had several concussions through his independent career leading up to his time in the WWE. There's a famous story that Del Rio has on YouTube, if you haven't seen it, where Daniel got a concussion right in the middle of the match and had no idea where he was. And you just start to get very, very concerned. Then you hear things about this evasive testing, this on the brain about concussions and that long-term damage and the effects of concussions and how parts of your brain that are not damaged from the concussion will overcompensate for the other parts that damage, so it will give off the appearance that your brain is fully healed and fully recovered. However, this testing has showed that the damaged parts of the brain haven't fully recovered, and they test this through a number of ways. I know that the reaction time was one of them, and it was on Inside MMA, and I kind of felt like, well, this is kind of what has been needed for a very long time, but I'm glad that it's out there now. And obviously Daniel Bryan had these similar tests, and these tests showed that there was something, there was some damage that needed to be healed, and he needed to kind of be away from wrestling. And I think, and I feel, with all this knowledge that has come out with Concussions, now you've got the film Concussion that has come out, which actually has Dr. Maroon in it, someone playing Dr. Maroon. I feel like it's for the best. And Daniel Bryan is one of my favourite wrestlers of all time. One of my top, maybe 5 wrestlers of all time. Huge fan of his. I mean, you can't see what I'm staring at right now, but let me quickly show you something. I was so elated when I got this. When I got this, granted it came with Sin Cara, but I was so elated when I got this, and then I got this as well, and I was even more elated. I've been a huge fan of his. First time I ever heard about him was in 2001, and from that point onwards, he was just one of the best. When he was the Ring of Honor World Champion, to me, he was the best wrestler in the world at that point. When he was the champion in Ring of Honor, I felt that the WWE need to break the bank and sign him like that right now. Seeing his WWE career and how it unfolded, it was very interesting, and there's a lot of important lessons learned from that. For me, it's interesting that he's someone that is not the stereotypical WWE superstar that we have been trained to like. You know, the 6'5", muscular, reasonably good looking athlete that apparently has charisma even though we don't see it. He's the complete opposite of what they have trained us to like. And in the wrestling business, when you're a good guy or a bad guy, a heel or a face, whatever you want to call it, it's about making those people love you or making those people hate you, but buying into you one way or the other. And Daniel Bryan had that over most wrestlers of this modern generation. Those fans loved him. I can't recall of a time where fans in the past maybe 5 to 7 to 8 to 10 years have rioted because their favourite wrestler was excluded from a main event or was not used correctly. I have never seen anything like that in the past 10 years, and Daniel Bryan had that. He had that over every wrestler in the company. People rioted. It made news. BBC News covered it. It was, it was quite a thing to see. Fans absolutely detested what the company gave us, and they wanted Daniel Bryan. And to be honest with you, that was the story of his WWE career. Go back to NXT, the very next year after that, the next year after that, the next year after that. It was just this thing. The fans grew to like him and were attached to him. And that's the one thing that Roman Reigns does not have right now. And Daniel Bryan had that. And that's a very, very special thing that people may overlook, and Bryan had that, and that's what got him there. I think those fans made him even more than what he was coming in. And you look at his career in the WWE and you wonder, some people say, was he used correctly at times? At times it's very debatable, but then I look at it like this. He got to basically save WrestleMania 30. Because let's be honest, that WrestleMania could have been an absolute disaster. That WrestleMania was going to be an absolute disaster. And this chain of events happened where CM Punk left, Dave Bautista was rejected. No one was really excited of the idea of seeing Orton and Batista. And Daniel Bryan, they had to put Bryan in. The fans' passion to see that man in the main event changed everything and saved the WrestleMania. And we all got that feel-good WrestleMania moment where you see our guy come out on top and he's got the 2 championship belts, and he's standing there, and it was a nice scene with him and his niece there, and it was probably one of the most memorable things I have ever seen in wrestling, and it kind of surpasses an image I had a few years back, where I've often said that one of the wrestling moments I'll never forget was seeing Benoit and Guerrero in the ring together, holding their belts at the end of WrestleMania 20. Obviously, that memory is very tainted for me now, but it was nice to then have this memory of Daniel Bryan with the 2 belts, and it was nice to see our guy get his moment. And he had quite a few moments in the company when you think about it, and the whole world knows who he is. The whole world knows the boy's name. The whole world knows how good he really is, and how significant he is and will continue to be to professional wrestling, obviously in a different capacity. But this is someone that made a huge impression on not only wrestling but also its fans, and probably the inner workings of wrestling. Because if you think about it, I think him and CM Punk may not get the credit for this, but they have probably opened the door even more so for smaller wrestlers at this time in this timeline, and opened the door even more so for independent wrestlers, because if you've noticed now, the company are taking a chance on these kinds of wrestlers, whereas back in 2004, 2005, they were not taking a chance on these kind of wrestlers at all. They were not bringing in any of these wrestlers, and they kind of just about did with CM Punk, and now they've done it even more so with Daniel Bryan, and in a lot of ways, those two open that door even more so for what we're getting in NXT with Finn Balor and Kenta and Kevin Owens and Austin Aries and Samoa Joe. And I think that those guys have made a huge contribution to that, and that's saying something. To me, a legacy is something that you leave behind that continues to grow, and that to me is a part of the Daniel Bryan legacy, that he opened a door even more so for the next wave of independent talents to eventually make their way to the WWE, for the next wave of smaller based wrestlers to come into the WWE. And that is a huge part of the Daniel Bryan legacy, and in addition to the love that the fans had to him, in addition to the wonderful run that he had in Ring of Honor and the independence and in Evolve and Dragon Gate USA, all of that is a part of the Bryan legacy. And for me as a fan, I got a huge sense of relief in a way when he did announce his retirement, because I don't wish to see someone that I'm a huge fan of and admire be chewed up and spat out by the industry he loves, and we see him as a broken down person years later. And I'm happy to see that he is going to enjoy the rest of his life, and he's going to do things that are even bigger than professional wrestling in the WWE. He's eventually going to have a family, and he's going to do so many other things, and I am glad that he's going to have the mental faculties and the physical faculties to go and enjoy the rest of his life. And wow, this is a tougher video than I realised. As a fan, I just want to say to him, thank you very much for pretty much giving your entire mind, body and soul for a schmuck like me to have something to be entertained by on a Friday evening and a Saturday evening and a Sunday evening. And you will obviously never be forgotten. And go out, enjoy the rest of your life. Wrestling is this much of your life. You have a long, wide, big, deep life to go out and live and enjoy, and it's time for you to enjoy the fruits of your labour, and I really hope that you go out and do that, and I believe he will, and I hope to meet him one day. Thank you very much, Daniel Bryan. Let me know what you think down below. Comment down below how you feel about it. It was nice to say goodbye to somebody on much better terms than we have before. Anyways, guys, I am done. Whew, that was very, very hard to do. Comment down below, give me a thumbs up, subscribe. Take care, guys, and peace.